Welcome to the Give Back Lab. I'm your host, Daniela DiGrandi. You've entered a space where bold voices, real stories, and unfiltered conversations come to life. Here in the lab, we're breaking bias, shifting thinking, and exploring the power of giving back through truth, vulnerability, and diverse perspectives. We celebrate diversity of thought and everything beautiful that makes us human. This isn't just talk, it's real, it's raw, and it's exactly the kind of space we need. We're unlearning, relearning, and evolving together. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today at the Give Back Lab. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Dr. Micheal Hynes, who has been a lifelong educator, 27 plus years. I am so honored to have you here with us. Thank you for joining us today at the Give Back Lab.
Thank you, Danielle. It's a pleasure to be here.
I am excited to have this conversation. I know that you have a very long history in the education sector and academia. I'd love to talk to you about that and where you are today, where you're going. I know you have a book coming out. I want to get to all of that,
Sure.
all of the things. So why don't you start us off today by telling us a little bit about who you are and what your journey's been?
Sure. So, education for more than, as you said, 27 years, and I have seen a lot of changes, just like I'm sure you have as a parent. You see all these
Yeah.
different changes that happens in education. I will say this, though, as much as everything has changed around the world, education really hasn't changed that much, quite frankly. And that was part of my push and part of what I was trying to do over those 27 years is to really focus on what's most important for kids. And I think to some degree, I've been somewhat successful in doing so. Started as a teacher and then was fortunate enough to work as a superintendent of schools in 3 different districts for over 14 years. And then my life suddenly came to a screeching halt, as we discussed offline, um, where unfortunately, I had a mishap, some bad decision making on my part personally, and what ended up happening was out of education and into a whole new learning landscape, both taking an internal journey and then seeing the world through very different eyes because of the past, gosh, 14 months. Um, After going 110 miles an hour for almost 27 years, you get to see the world through a much different lens. And I have to say, I've really appreciated that in learning all those different things over the past 14 months.
Yeah, it's incredible, right? I mean, sometimes in life, we find ourselves in unfortunate situations and unfortunate moments through one avenue or another, and it's important. I'm a big believer in always finding that silver lining to the dark cloud, and everything has a lesson. Um, the the shift is incredible, right? Because I think it probably gave you some time to reflect, and really implement stuff that you've been doing in the education space, but now in your own personal life, right? Kind of like taking your own advice, right? That reinvention, that reintroduce, relearn. How do I do what looks different today than it did? Right? We talk about education, and as a parent, oh good Lord, Common Core still gives me nightmares, right? Learning math through shapes and such. I still don't understand it. So I understand from a parent's perspective. I also have a lot of friends who are teachers and educators, and the frustration that they've felt over, curriculums and things that were handed down to them. You must do it this way, kind of a thing. And I think that as a young person, when you go into college and you set out and you want to be a teacher and you want to be an educator, you have a passion and a drive, right? You don't get rich being a teacher, and maybe one or two, but generally you don't get rich being a teacher, and you have to have a passion for it. You have to have a drive, and that art of teaching is a skill. It really is an art, that a lot of teachers have, and young students, and they go into it having this romanticized idea of what teaching's going to be, and I think that what actually ends up happening is something totally different, right? So over the years, I'm sure, have coached and worked through this changing curriculums from the changes logistically in how to deliver teaching, but then the soft skills and the teachers and all of that. And so to take that now and reflect back on how it changes your life, I think that eye opening. I mean, how did that feel, right? How do you navigate through that?
So before I answer that, because I love that question. Let me talk about education real quick because I'm still very, very passionate about it. If you took a picture 100 years ago, 1926, right? And you looked at what a hospital looked like, you looked at what an automobile looked like, an airplane looked like, you looked at even what the supermarket looked like, for goodness sake, right? And then you look at them now, they're completely different, right?
Okay.
They have evolved and then some. When you look at the education system, especially the way that we deliver information to children, that really hasn't changed. Now, some things have changed, such as standards, like as you mentioned, Common Core. Um, chalkboards moved to smart boards. Um, the buildings maybe were upgraded in some ways, right, to be compliant with all the different codes that are out there. But education as a whole really hasn't changed much at all. And especially in New York, when you look at the Regents exams, they have been around, and I'm not kidding when I say this, since the Civil War, and
Wow.
they really haven't changed all that much. So when we look at the future for our kids, for the world, for New York, nationally, we are, in my estimation, very, very behind. Um, and as you mentioned, soft skills, which I think are, and first of all, that term is like so overplayed. They're not soft at all. I think they're really inherently incredibly important for kids to not only be proficient in, but to truly master them. Because we have to separate ourselves from the technology that's out there now and distinguish
Mm,
ourselves very much so. So, taking that inward journey as far as learning how to self regulate, all those different soft skills as far as communicating, connecting with others, all those different things should be paramount within a child's education. And they're not even secondary, they're not even tertiary. There's a top 10 list, is probably number 700. And
right.
that's the switch that has to take place. And yes, so to answer your question regarding, you know, a lot of thinking, clearly when somebody like you or anybody else, most of us, right, we're shot out of a cannon in the morning and we are just running and running and doing and doing. When that all goes away, and then you're left with yourself to think, to contemplate, to think about what the past was and what did it really mean, to think about where you presently are, and then, my goodness, what does the future actually look like? What does that entail? It's a very frightening and for some a very sobering prospect, but it's something I would recommend for everybody because I think if you do it well, and there's no, I think, right way to do it except to sit with yourself and to really, really dig deep,
Mm,
you start understanding what's really important in life. And a lot of the things that we chase, a lot of things that we run after, they're fleeting and they don't really lead to much happiness. They lead to temporary pleasure, maybe for, it's like you buy a car, that new car smell kind of goes away after like, what, like a week?
yeah,
It,
right before the first payment.
or the first payment. Exactly. Exactly. That's exactly right. So I have found a very different way of viewing not only how I live, but how I think some of us should begin to contemplate living, regardless of what stage we are in life. So that's kind of what I've been digging into.
I'd love to dive into that a little bit, right? Because we talk about, let's start with the students and the whole education hasn't moved forward. Yes, they're still in the classroom. And as a parent of children who um, are more akin to salmon because they fight the tide at every they question, question, question. I guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. It's not with ill intent, it's with curiosity, genuine curiosity, right? And so for for my kids, and I know a lot of students out there, the sit down and take the information that I'm giving you so you can pass that Regents test, which is the only thing that we're doing here, right? That doesn't have that creative thinking, and the introduction onto how to continue to recognize, develop, and hone those skills doesn't exist, right? But now in today's world, as we enter AI, when you're coming out of elementary school and going into high school and then going into college, right? So elementary school is all about take in what I've given you and then regurgitate it on a test. And then high school is a little bit like that, but a little bit free thinking.
Mhm.
And then we put them into college, and in college, it's like, well, I don't know, figure it out, right? And they don't have. I've always said, they don't have the art of studying. There is an art form to studying. There are skills to studying. You just don't. Some person may sit down and read a book and intake it all, and some people may need something else, right? So, how have you taken that? Like, I guess, what have you seen in that space as evolving? Do you see it changing? And with technology moving in the direction that it is, I think it's imperative, but do you see that happening from your experience there?
So I will say, I think like most things, you have it in pockets. It's certainly not systemic. I think it depends. I think very much on not only the school district you go to. I think it depends on the administrator that's in charge of the district of the building. I think it depends on the teacher, whether they are, I call it the tickler file. They pull out the September folder and they do the same folder every September, October, right? And they do the
Right.
same thing.
Right.
Or you have somebody who's incredibly, innovative and they're pushing the envelope, so to speak. I think the shift from, as you said, regurgitation of facts, which I think is like low level clerical work, as opposed to performance based, which is real world, right? So you have things that you learn, then you perform them, you apply them. So you take a sport, you take music, you take art. That's all performance based. You're learning a skill, you're applying it, you're demonstrating, you're showing what you've done. We don't really do that in education because it's incredibly Pavlovian. The system has structured on an industrial model where, every 43 minutes the bells are ringing, we're salivating like Pavlov, and then we're going to the next thing. So
Right.
the structures have been changed, but I think the philosophy, as far as having kids work together and then to perform more, is starting to change, but it's changing very slowly, unfortunately. It's, as opposed to the speed of light or the speed of sound, it's the speed of a snail, unfortunately. And
Right.
I think it depends on, that's why school leaders, I think if it's a public school, boards are really important, or if it's a private school, the president and the trustees are really important, because if the philosophy is really forward facing, then that'll integrate and trickle down to the classroom. But we are far from other countries as far as the way that they educate their kids. That's for sure.
Right. Right. Definitely, for sure. So, out of all of that work that you did trying to push that boulder up that hill, right, and implementing change, and then now you're here in this space,
Mhm.
right, and you're about to launch your book. I'd love to talk about that segue, right? How do you what is it that you're embracing now, and what is that leading into? What is your journey from here out?
So I think the biggest change has been noticing. Like when you're and like I said, I keep saying 100 miles an hour, but when it's like you're in a car and you're driving really fast, everything's a blur on the sides. When you take time to notice the things that were always there in front of you, it has a much heavier weight to it and a much different meaning. So, I guess, for instance, for the past year and a half, and it's part of the subtitle, and I'm not ashamed to say it because I think it's really, really important. The subtitle is what I learned from. So, well, the title of the book is Quiet Lessons in a Noisy World, but the subtitle is what I learned from vacuuming, folding the laundry, and walking the dog. Those 3 things is probably I learned more in this past 14 months than I probably have collectively over the past 27 years of working. And the reason why I say that is because you have time to think and you have time to be by yourself. and you
Mm.
have time to ruminate over things that not that you lost, but that you figure out are the most important things. So, for instance, whenever I used to walk in the morning, I always have my phone out. I'm always making phone calls. I'm doing as opposed to just being and walking and noticing the stars out early in the morning or notice the birds starting to whatever, starting to make noise. And why are they making noise at this time? For a year, Daniela, I walked the same path, but I noticed the changes of the seasons. Because as you
Right.
walk the same path, you notice, oh, wow, the flowers are starting to bloom. Oh, they're starting to die. The leaves are starting to come out. Oh, they're starting to, oh, the people putting the decorations around their house. It must be this. It's like you realize these things that you don't realize before. And then I'm thinking, well, how can you then apply that in the workspace, regardless of where you are, whatever type of organization? And as the old adage goes, I think sometimes you have to slow down to speed up in some ways, right? To move that work forward. And I think we've forgotten how to slow down in life personally. I think professionally, we're always all about executing and meeting KPIs either ahead of schedule or, you know, before this person does. So I could, make sure I'm noticed before somebody else, right? All those
Right.
different things. And I think what I'm saying is it really doesn't matter because the quality of the work will always be the quality of the work. And you'll be better for it. And I think people will learn from you if you learn how to slow down and to notice things that you didn't notice before in the organization or in your personal life.
I love that. It's very much, I call it living intentionally, right? And, I had a medical thing a few years ago, back in 2017, and, I came out of that going, "Well, between now and dead, I'm gonna live my best life," because you don't know when that is, right? None of us do.
Nope.
None of us know. It's the only guarantee in life, and none of us know when it's coming, and so I have that philosophy of living intentionally, right? So, which is why the Give Back Lab exists, right? How can I live intentionally, support my family, be a good friend, be a good partner, be a good sister, whatever, daughter, but also how can I give back to this great world with what I've learned? And to your point of, you walked that same walk, but with your phone and with email and with the conversations and whatever, for a long time, I was the queen of multitasking. And I can still multitask like nobody's business, right? It is a skill of mine that I've honed. But I agree with you. I think that the intentional living in the moment, and it's not to say that sometimes you don't have to take a phone call or whatever the case is, but I think that we need to allow ourselves that time. And I think that we get so lost in the identity of being that worker, um, that we let everything else slide, right? We get lost in the identity of being the parent, but what does actually being a mother or a father mean? And it's not just about parenting the child, but it's also about being a reflection of what you would want them to be when they grow up, right? A role model for per se. So I mean, I love that slowing down bit and living intentionally. Um, I love that. I think it's very reflective. And I think that it was a gift that was given to you, right? One of the blessings of finding yourselves from going a million miles an hour to almost a dead stop, right? Is that and I say that about COVID too,
Yeah.
right? COVID forced everybody to take a step back and be in your home and be amongst your family. And some of them decided they didn't like each other, and some of them grew to like each other more. But our kids, they're and how many travel sports and team sports and school and this and that. We get so wrapped up in the doing that we forget the living.
It's
Um,
yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I think when somebody is, especially if they are, let's say, upper management, in some ways it becomes part of your identity. For me, it was like, I'm Mike, the superintendent. I'm
right.
Dr. Mike, right? But when that's gone, then you're left saying, well, I am not that anymore. So what am I and who am I? Now, of course, I'm always a father, I'm always a husband. But when something happens like that, whether it's an illness or a divorce or an accident, you're left going, okay, well, that identity has to die. And that's not the most important part of who you are. And so when you reevaluate and you reassess, you start saying, you're always pursuing happiness. You always think happiness is right around the corner, or the next big thing is right around the corner. That's going to change everything. When I get this, this is what's going to happen. My life's going to be great. Or your life is going to be great if you do this 5 months from now. It's not the case. I think what I found was all these great things were always happening. I just never appreciated them and or paid attention to them. I thought they were nice. And when we think about the good old days in your life are those distant memories that maybe we didn't really pay that much attention to. Like when you see a picture you haven't seen in like 10 years, you're like, oh my goodness, that was when life was great. But when you're living your life at that moment, you may not be thinking it's so great.
Right. You're
Oops.
always chasing the next thing,
You're always
right?
chasing the next thing. And I think for me, I'm still relatively young at 55, but I will say I do not want to live that way anymore, chasing. Now,
Yeah.
whatever the next chapter is, I'm fully embracing this new part of me, which is great. And my kids are like, "Who the heck is this guy? What is happening to dad?" And my wife is like, "What? Why are you so nice? Like, why are you doing all these things?" But so, as you said, it's a silver lining. And I think for me, I just want to educate people, especially for those in that rat race, for those who are on that hamster wheel, to learn how to take a step back and to pause and to try to do that as often as they can if they haven't done it before.
Right.
Put structures in place to do that more often.
Right. No, for sure. Uh, because that is, especially in this era where technology is moving so fast, everybody is caught in this fast cycle, and I just feel like everybody's sprinting, and people are going to start tripping over their own feet, and then they're going to trip over each other, and there's no collaboration almost anymore, right? And like you said, it's like, you're trying to race to be ahead of the person next to you, right? Try to get noticed first. And um I think it's an important conversation to have right now.
But, Danielle, everybody's more connected than, right, any time before, but nobody really knows who other people really are, right?
Right.
We're on
Right.
group texts, we're on social media, we think everyone's living their best life, outward facing, but nobody really knows who their
Right.
neighbor is as much as we used to years ago. I mean, you have kids now, and I know this because I have a fifth grader now on group texts, and then if they don't respond within like 10 seconds, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna, I'm missing out on what's gonna happen.
Right.
And this is happening like in fifth grade, the group texts and mom's getting and dad's getting 10,000 texts from schools. And we're hyper connected with very little true connection. It's crazy.
That is a perfect way to say it, right? And it creates such a false identity, I think, right? Where these kids and even adults, they're attaching their value now to how many likes they got, how many views they got, whatever the case is, right? How many I know my kids are in high school and teenagers, and snap streaks, right, on Snapchat and things like that. So it is connected truly to their identity. I too find it crazy. And they'll be on a group text or a group chat party. God, I remember when we used to have those telephone line parties when we
Yeah.
were younger, right? So now
Recording
they've
what
just
goes
taken
on.
into video, yeah. How many
It's
people
true.
can we three-way in? Who's got three-way calling? Um, so now they just do it on video, but how many of them are unknowns, right? And they call them mutuals. Well,
Yeah.
you're on the phone with 10 people. Do you know these 10 people? Well, no, but these three are mutuals. Mutuals how? Like, what does that mean? And so there is this connection, but what lacks is the collaboration.
Yeah.
right? They're connected, but it's almost like they're connected to keep an eye out for A, make sure I'm not missing something, the old FOMO, and B, can I stay a step or two ahead of everybody else, right? In that competitiveness.
Sure.
But I'd love to talk about your book and how, pivoting out of academia and into business enterprise in that business, because as a business leader, I will tell you that I think that your expertise on the art of learning, the art of teaching is huge in the business space. And there's a huge need for it because when people go into business, they come out of college, they go into to corporate, and they only learn what they need to learn in that space for that job.
Yep.
And then they may learn just a little bit more to get a new job. But we learn that we lose that art of learning, right? That studying, that joy of gathering information, the hunting, the hunt for information and knowledge, because we're usually pigeonholed into a role or a job. And
Yep.
now with AI coming in,
Yep.
right, I think it's just blowing the lid off of it. Um,
It is, and I wrote an article, gosh, about 6 months ago about what education will look like 10 years from now. Like, so if we hit the fast forward button, if there's some button somewhere, right? And we looked at education systems. Let's say here in the United States, they're going to look, not that I'm Nostradamus, but I think it's going to look incredibly different. I think teachers won't be teachers anymore. I think AI will be the content deliverers because the content really is most of it's not going to change, but it will evolve clearly because things are changing,
right,
especially history. History is changing, right? And any second, especially history now. Um, so AI, I think, is going to be integral in as far as the delivery system. What we need from professors, I think, what we need from teachers is those soft skills,
right,
the supports for the learner, right? To help them, to assist them in some ways, whether it's to allocate resources, to have a deeper understanding of what it is, to answer those questions, not to get into mental health, but mental health is really, really important. And I don't know about you, I can't learn a darn thing if I'm upset up here for whatever reason and I can't, let's say, recalibrate, right?
right,
So I think you're going to have teachers who are going to help and assist learners how to recalibrate to optimize for them to be in the best headspace in order for them to learn. So the delivery, I think, is going to be AI, but the professors and the teachers are going to like not hold their hands, but be a support system for them to learn. And I think that will transcend education and that will go into the workplace. I
right,
think if we're going to deliver information for workers who are working within any organization, I think it's incredibly important that the professional development that's there, not only is it rigorous, but it really, um, the learner feels like they're part of something bigger than themselves, right? They're not learning in a silo. They're not, just another widget on the conveyor belt. They're part of
right,
something more. And I think a really good educator allows that learner to understand, yes, this is important here, but it transcends here, right? You can apply these skills in a lot of different places because a lot of us don't want to learn things if we think it's just for doing X. But if it allows us to do X, Y, and Z in
right,
different ways, I think that sets up the learner to be a lot more successful and for the organization to be more successful too, because they're more inclined to not only learn it, but to apply that skill.
right. I love that. And I think that's so true, especially in a business setting, right? Because I totally understand with the whole needing to reskill and upskill people, but when they are not in the right mental space because their job is getting displaced or whatever the case is,
Yep.
it's hard to do that. So leaders can run around talking about let's, upskill and reskill our workforce, but if they don't have a clear path, we're going to, yes, we're taking this 10 person, let's just use help desk. We're taking this 10-person help desk and we're putting it down to 5 because we're going to put 5 agents or 10 agents and whatever, bots. But what do you do with those 5? Well, we're going to take the top 5 that are into whatever, tech or sales or whatever. We're
Yeah.
going to reskill them or give them more skill certifications, and we're going to deploy them to those teams, or we're going to create another channel of revenue. If you don't have the vision put in place, and we're just talking about displacing humans with technology, what we forget about is that that technology also needs to constantly be fed, right? AI only has the information, the data that it's been given,
Yep.
and it is built to create connectors and make connections, which is the hallucinations piece, right? But unless it continues to be fed good quality data, books getting written and, thought pieces put into place, et cetera, it's going to stale out, right? So I think that that's super important about those skills and having people there to support people to say, yes, we're going to learn these things through this because it's going to open up these avenues. Sometimes, forest through the trees kind of a thing, right? People don't actually see it. I think mental health is huge.
It's huge, and it's
Yeah.
not going away. It's only going to get worse. Right now it's 1 out of 3, at least with students. It's gonna continue to uptick because all we're doing, my humble opinion, is we're putting Band-Aids on it, and we're not
Right.
getting to the root cause of, why are we having so many struggles from a mental health standpoint. And there's so many different spokes on that wheel. That's like
Oh,
that's like 10 different conversations. But the reality is we have young kids. There's no other generation than the kids that we're serving right now who are more anxious, depressed, or suicidal than any generation before. I will say this, and I'm going to extrapolate upward. I think that's the same for adults,
yeah.
and I don't see it getting any better. And if corporations, if organizations don't really make a concerted effort to um, try to combat that in some way, then they're gonna see, I think, a dip in not only forget revenue, but as far as workforce productivity for sure.
Yeah. I think that the corporations, the institutions in any industry, any segment that make it are the ones that acknowledge that and lead with intention, right? They identify the elephant in the room, call it out and start to address it rather than, pretend it's not there or try to muscle through it.
Yep.
Because
White knuckle it. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Like um, I think at every age level, and all of the physiological effects that mental health bring, not just for suicide, but sickness and stress and record absences and things like that. The anxiety level of just living is a little intense, right? And talk about the kids with all their snaps and their Instagrams and all their stuff that that's a natural anxiety level that they're it's self-inflicted, societal, right, amongst their circles, um, but it is the way of what today is, and as we launch them, that next generation into the workforce, right, and as we have this workforce and our generation exits the workforce, what's coming in, right? That group of individuals that have higher anxiety, have less tolerance, than we did, right? We were more resilient, I think, in our generation, right? The generation that was kinda, like, left outside and,
Yeah,
you
well,
know,
that's you're right, we were like feral cats,
Yes, the feral generation.
the parents would kick you out, Saturday morning, "We'll see you," and they come back to eat like cats do, in the afternoon, and
Yeah,
then come
yeah,
back at night. But it's true, kids are microchipped right now. They can't go, 50 feet past their house without parents knowing, "Oh,
right.
there they are." We knew where we were because the bicycles were on the driveway, and that's where
Exactly,
everybody was. So, and there's
exactly.
something to be said for that, but that's never, I shouldn't say never. That's not right. I don't see that coming back, unfortunately.
Right,
But we
right,
have to try to think of different ways to give students and, quite frankly, more adults those types of experiences so they can begin to flourish, which they're
right.
not doing right now.
So, through your running, folding laundry, what was the 3rd thing?
Oh, vacuuming. I'm
Vacuuming.
a master vacuumer and folder now.
Yeah, excellent. You leave the lines on the carpet.
I do. Just to show evidence when my wife comes home, she knows that.
I love that. So, out of all of those tasks, how do we take, right? How do we take the stuff that's in your book and pivot? How do we pivot out of academia and make it so that not just everyday life, but business owners, founders, right? The enterprises, any level
Yeah.
of business can really apply this kind of thinking of living intentionally.
So I'll start with I had been working with a tech CEO, and I've been focusing on his calendar. And because that's one of the very few things a CEO, or many of us, for the most part, can have control over is their calendar, right? And when I looked at his calendar, not only his daily calendar, but what his week looked like, I actually started getting agita. Like just looking at it, forget trying to live it. But I lived the same calendar when I was a superintendent. You know, like I said, we're a shot out of a cannon, and we're starting at 5:30 in the morning, and we're not really ending until 10 o'clock. 10:30 at night, then rinse and repeat.
Right.
Um, what I when I worked with this gentleman who's a brilliant, brilliant man, and I have to say, quite a reflective man. Um, we built in time in his day to take time for himself,
Right.
like during the day, starting when he woke up, because right away, like right when he woke up, he was like, I'm checking my phone, I'm checking emails, I'm checking texts. I'm like, absolutely do not, do not do that. So I asked him in his 14, 16-hour day, which is only what I saw, by the way. I'm sure it's much longer. I said, if you can start with 20 minutes in the first week and then over a month graduate to an hour every single day. So that means I don't care if it's 15-minute increments, if you're taking a half hour at a chunk, but you figure out within your day and you start slow, you start with, 15, 20 minutes, for the first week. And every single day you take 20 minutes to not do anything, but be with yourself, to breathe, to eat, to take a walk. Because and the research is there. I know you know the research is there. When you have the ability to not look at anything and to decompress and to come back to homeostasis in some way internally, you are almost 10 times more productive. It's just
Sure.
it's like the runner, right? The runner who's sprinting and sprinting, but they don't stop for 5 seconds, take a deep breath, have some water, and then try to continue. It's the same thing for the human system when they're operating up here, and all they do is live in their brain. So to give yourself permission to slow down, starting slowly and then incrementally doing that over the week and then over the month. And unfortunately, I don't have real data to support it. I only have what he has shared with me, which to him, he said it was life changing because he never gave himself permission to slow down during the day. And I told him I could almost, oh, I'm using the old Jets here, like Joe Namath. I can almost Joe Namath guarantee you, if you do this, you will be so much more productive. And more important, you're modeling for others. You're modeling for your staff how to recalibrate and how to move forward throughout the day. So that's one of the things from a business standpoint or from an organizational standpoint or from a CEO standpoint is giving yourself permission to be by yourself to recalibrate because most don't. Most think they have to go, it's like a tissue in a tissue box. They pull the tissue out, they pull it, another one comes up, and then they take that tissue and they use it, and then they keep pulling tissues all day long. Stop
Right.
all the tissues just for a little bit. The second thing is at the end of the day, um, to write down and to reinforce two positive things that you could think of that maybe you wouldn't have noticed before during your time of not doing anything. But believe it or not doing anything is doing something. So to reinforce that, because then you're creating this positive reinforcement loop that during this time, here are two things that I never probably would have noticed or I didn't think about or that really were important to me during those times of slowing down. And you do that every single day before you go to bed. You journal and you do that. And so collectively over the past 5 months, he's been doing that, and he's been trying to model that for his staff. Now that sounds so simple, but we are creatures of habit. And like most habits, they don't form after 15 days or 30 days. It takes a good 45 to 60 days to have something to really,
Right.
really stick where it becomes part of something that you do. That's what I would begin with is giving yourself permission to find time throughout your day to slow down. I took a lot of time to say that, but it's doesn't cost anything, by the way.
Right.
So it's not like you're buying an app or you're going to the store and you're buying something. It's you're embedding it in your calendar because you're prioritizing. And just like anything else in life, if you prioritize it, you're more inclined to do it because it's important to you. So
Right.
that's what
And
I would suggest.
I think that's huge because we're so taught how to not be selfish, right? And to me, that I call it being self-full, right? You have to give yourself permission. We have been so conditioned to be in service of others, right? And to not be selfish, and that's not the right way to be. That I think that when we take time for ourselves, we look at ourselves as, "Oh my god, I'm being selfish right now. I could have given this 30 minutes, 15 minutes to so and so who's waiting for me." Um, but I think that in order to be I agree, in order to be reflective and balanced, we need that minute to take that breath, and recalibrate. So I love that. I
And
love that.
the last thing I'll say, and I'll keep it very brief, is we are living in a time where we are so incredibly distracted. We
Yeah.
are distracted by a bazillion things. We make more than what I heard something like 4,000 decisions, by the end of the day, which I think is very, very light, by the way.
Yeah.
But they're micro decisions, but they're still decisions nonetheless. And we encounter, for the most part, especially working in a system like you do, or like most CEOs do, or even mid-level people who are working, you're meeting a lot of different people. This is something I think is really, really important, and I'll give credit to George W. Bush for this. And I say that only because I've read his biography. When people entered his office and he had a meeting, he would make sure all the phones went in the bin, and then they would have a conversation. There is nothing worse than somebody looking down as you're talking and they're texting, right?
Okay.
Because you're telling that person you're not important. You're not worth my time as I'm trying to have a conversation with you. So when I work with CEOs and I work with others who encounter a lot of different people, you make that person feel like they are the only thing that matters while you're having that conversation. And the first thing you do is turn off the notifications on your watch. You put your phone away. If the house is burning down, someone will let you know, I'm assuming, right?
Right.
So you prioritize the person who is in front of you, whether it's the custodian, whether it's somebody from, that you're conversing with, across the pond, whoever it is, they are your number one priority for 15 minutes, a half hour, however long it takes. Doesn't matter what position they're in. And over time, that builds something that you just can't buy somewhere else because people know when you're paying attention to them and you're not downloading, other things in your mind as you're speaking to somebody, right? And it's really apparent when somebody's downloading, like had to have a response for whatever something that you're saying that they may not like, and they have a rebuttal right away. So the art of not downloading and being fully present when you're talking to somebody is a commodity that you just can't purchase somewhere.
Right. And it's something I think that needs to be taught because it's not I don't know about taught, maybe it needs to be encouraged more so that it can be practiced. Um, I don't know if taught's the right word, but it definitely needs we need to give people space to be able to practice that and encourage them to practice it, so that they have those opportunities to develop those skills. So tell us a little bit more about this book. When's it coming out? Give us a little stories in it. What do you want us to know?
Well, I'll give one. I'm trying to think of a funny story because I don't want to bore you with. It has threads of spirituality in it because that's another thing for me that fell by the wayside. Just whether we agree or not, I think when we start serving others and we start thinking we are not the epicenter of the universe, meaning us,
Mm,
and the world is a very, very big place. Faith for me became very, very important. But I will say one of the best stories, because I used to be very judgy before this happened. And I didn't think I was, by the way, until
Mm.
I realized I was very judgy. So I'll give a funny story. When I was, because I walk to 7-Eleven every morning. There's a 7-Eleven right by me, and I bring my dogs with me when I go for a walk. And it's like Norm from Cheers. I walk into 7-Eleven, and guy's like, "Hey, how are you?" And he starts ringing me up before I even get there because he knows I get the same coffee, and I walk out. There's a yoga studio right over where this 7-Eleven, and as I'm walking there, and it's 5 o'clock in the morning, and I know there's a class coming because all these cars start coming at the same time. It's all the yoga moms, they start coming at the same time. And they're pulling in in their Jeeps and their Teslas and their Audis, and they're pulling in, and they all look the same. They have the ponytail, they have the big water bottle, they have their mats under. 5:30 in the morning, they're all walking into class. The old me would have been like, look at these people walking in, looking all nice and walking in there and doing their yoga at 5:30 in the morning. It must be really nice to do that. But it dawned on me that we all want the same thing before we start our day. We want peace. We want to be grounded. I see people who are running at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like, these people are clinically insane running at 5 o'clock in the morning. They're insane, but they want the same thing. They want to be grounded and they want peace. So when I see the avalanche of the cars coming, the old me would have been like, who are these people doing this? Now I'm like, God bless these women for doing this, because all they want is to start their day in the right way. They want to be in a good head place. They want to be there, if they have kids, for their kids, and they just want peace before they go out into this big crazy world where things are happening that you just still can't believe are happening. And we all want the same thing, whether it's me
Right.
going to 7-Eleven, whether it's them going to yoga, whether it's a guy running at 4 o'clock in the morning and you're like, what the heck is he doing? That to me, and so I write a little vignette about that. I think it's probably, I like to think it's a little bit funnier than that, but it is profound, because we are so quick to judge others for the way they look and what they're doing, and not really trying to understand what it is they're trying to do and what they want in life.
Right. And I agree with that because I understand that as well, right? The I always say sometimes I make quiet judgments in my brain and just kind of let it go, right? And we're all human. And I think we all do it.
Mhm.
It's just a question of how much it drives us in our actions, right? And anything that is out of the norm to who we are as individuals, whether it be culturally, politically, religiously, whatever, w- we're just humans and individuals, and that's what we do. And I think whether you act on it or don't is, what sets you apart. But I love that, and I think it's important to call that out. So what's next for you? What are you looking to do? What kind of exciting things can we see from coming? I think that you have a good footing.
So the book will be released. I believe it's going to be, I think it's February 5th or February 6th. And from there, I'm hoping, I'll get to work in different organizations to talk about how, you know, we can all begin to slow down, to want to be more productive, we want to be more grounded, and what that entails. But I also, for me, it's about, I think the most important thing for me is working with either CEOs or mid level people to help them not burn out so
Mhm.
quickly, and to prioritize the things that I think that maybe they fall by the wayside, that we think that they're not as important. And so for me, what used to get me up in the morning was, trying to make sure these top three things were done before anybody else did them. And then to tell the world about how great it was that how great I am for doing those things, and let's
Mhm.
celebrate those things. And to, in this very, very divisive world, help people take a step back. And we don't all need to be as divisive as these two separate sides, right? You have
Right.
extremes, right? You have these people and those people, and all they want to do is wring each other's necks. And that's all we see in the news. That's all we see all over the place. And then we start modeling those things, in different areas, right? Because it trickles down and it's hard not to absorb
Right.
those things. I want to work with people and organizations not to fall into that trap, hopefully. So
Yeah.
that's my goal.
No, I love that. I think that's super important. And I think especially with technology advancing as quickly as it is and the business landscape changing as a result, and that pendulum swinging back and forth, right? Whichever way it ends up, I think that is super important. I think that those skills and working with that C-suite to not, to recognize burnout for their staff and for themselves, I think is super important. And I think that is absolutely a growth lever for organizations that I work with. I talk about the same kind of thing, right? Where are you, where's your blank space? And you need to have a little bit of blank space because you have to accommodate for time for yourself or someone else, whatever it is. But that's important. It's important to, um, not only live intentionally, but also work intentionally. So that way you have some balance. So thank you so much for your time. This has been a fantastic conversation.
Thank you.
Do
I
you have,
appreciate it.
do you have any closing remarks for our audience?
So I think my only closing remark would be is going faster doesn't mean better.
Yeah,
And to take the time to appreciate what you have at the moment, because the moment that you have will be gone before you know it. And I think many of us don't do that nearly enough, especially during the week when the grind is really on, right? There's a reason why Wednesday is called hump day. There's no doubt about it. But I think in the end, if we, if you're my age, and again, I hit the fast forward button and I'm 70, I don't want Monday through Friday to be a blur. I want to appreciate Monday through Friday as much as anybody can and not
right.
just live for the weekends. That's
Right.
why we're here. We're not here to just enjoy the weekends. We're here to enjoy Monday through Sunday as much as we can.
I love that. Well, thank you so much. I love ending on that. Enjoy Monday through Sunday. I love that. Um, Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
I would love to have you back on the podcast in a few months, talk about your book and what it's doing and where you're working in organizations, and explore that a little bit deeper as you get further into that. I think that would be super beneficial for my audience. So if you're amenable, I'd love to welcome you back in a few months to discuss that. That'd be great.
That'd be great.
Thank you, Mr. Michael Hynes. Uh, Thank you, everyone, for joining us today on the Give Back Lab. Until next time, I'm Daniela. Talk to you soon. Bye. Thanks for joining us today in the Give Back Lab. If today's conversation moved you, challenged you, or made you just feel seen, share it forward. That's how change begins. Until next time, keep showing up, keep speaking truth, and giving back in your own way. The lab is always open.